is this later? This thing keeps coming up. Content preparation. What the hell is this? Preparing for reading. All right, I'll have to mess with the settings on that. All right, so test tomorrow, 4-8. You guys knew that. I've reminded you about that a few times. It'll be just like the last test, except slightly less material. It'll be only weeks 8 through 11, but still a lot of stuff, right? A lot of Buddhism. What did I write? Buddhism and meditation. Yeah, so that's the main stuff we're doing. So we got the life of the Buddha, the Buddhist teachings, right? The early teachings, Four Noble Truths, and then the greater vehicle, Nyogen Senzaki. You should know him pretty well by now. We talked about that a lot. And then meditation. We started to go over this book last time, but didn't finish. And then today we'll finish talking about meditation, and that'll be it. So some new things we'll cover today are these 3 sources, right? Why Buddhism is True. We started last time. McMindfulness we'll do today. And then the podcast. All 3 of those are today. We'll talk about Bhikkhu Bodhi today, McMindfulness today, evolutionary psychology today. Everything else, I think we've covered. So if you have any questions, please ask them now. And I'd be happy to go over them. Any specific terms you want to go over? Now is the time, folks, because if you don't ask now, you will not have another chance. I guess you can email me, Lauren. So we'll go over him today. Yeah, Bhikkhu Bodhi. He's a guy.
Can we also,
Go ahead.
can we also cover the Bodhisattva and the greater vehicle?
Okay, so let me find what you're talking about. So here's the greater vehicle. What was the other thing you said?
Bodhisattva.
Oh, Bodhisattva. Yeah, right beneath it. These 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good. So maybe one thing I can do. Greater vehicle is a big one, right? Maybe you can tell from the name. We spent a whole day on the greater vehicle. You might not have known that that's what we were doing, but here's where you will find it, is on 322. So it's a larger category that basically encompasses the later teachings of the Buddha, right? So the early teachings would be what did the Buddha teach during his lifetime? The later teachings would be things that kind of happened afterwards, right? So there are new developments that come a little bit later. So 322, again, if I were studying for this, I'd have all these slides on my hard drive already. That's when we started to talk about the forum post, so it's related to that. We finished the life of the Buddha, and then basically, the greater vehicle is here. Mahayana, the greater vehicle. So it's these later developments, right? Emphasis on wisdom and compassion. Here's a bunch of stuff that changes. You get the Bodhisattva. So everything that Ice is asking about are really related to each other. So I encourage you to go through these slides, go through this reading, right? Kyon has a whole chapter on the greater vehicle. So if you don't know anything about it, that's where you should look. The Bodhisattva is a little easier to answer. Maybe I'll ask you guys, what is a Bodhisattva? Can anybody answer that? What does Bodhi mean? We have Bhikkhu Bodhi right here. So Bodhi clearly means something. Bodhi is enlightenment. Sattva is being. Is this ringing a bell for anybody? It's an enlightenment being. So what's a Bodhisattva?
Would it be the Buddha?
It would not be the Buddha. Someone who is trying to become enlightened. Very good. So if you couldn't hear, Lauren was saying there was this diagram I drew on the board where all these different stages of the Bodhisattva with the Buddha at the top. Anybody who is on this path to enlightenment would be called a Bodhisattva. Yeah, so Joseph got it. Someone on the path to enlightenment. Exactly. So that is what a Bodhisattva is. So before the Buddha was a Buddha, he would be a Bodhisattva. And what's cool about the greater vehicle is rather than just him having access to enlightenment, sort of like, you know, there's Jesus and there's God, and none of us can ever hope to be Jesus, right? Because he's so far away and he's so great. The parallel in Buddhism would be there's the Buddha, and he's so far away, he's so great, but we can become a Buddha too. It's not easy to do, but this idea of the Bodhisattva opens that up to us. So there's something very appealing about it, is we can be on this path to enlightenment, and there are different levels. How do you get onto the path to enlightenment? I don't think this is one of your terms that I gave you, but it could have been. How do you get on that first Bodhisattva ground, that first step? How do you make a jump? Let's say I want to be a Bodhisattva. What would I have to do? Are you looking at your notes? You guys remember? Good. So vow to save all beings from suffering. I don't think I gave you anything about vows, did I? No. So, but again, I could have, right? So what is a bodhisattva? Is someone who dedicates their life to achieving enlightenment for the sake of all beings. It's this vow to save all beings from suffering. So there is this emphasis on compassion again, so that can tie in. What does compassion mean in Buddhism? Is wanting to save all beings from suffering. So all of these kind of relate together. This is a good way to study, is to think about the relationship between these terms. Yeah, maybe that's enough of that. Other questions you want to go over? So hopefully, maybe first I'll ask Isa, does that answer your question about the greater vehicle, Bodhisattva? Well, unless I hear otherwise, I'll assume that means yes. Other questions?
Is the test going to be in the same format as like the last test?
It will, yeah. So it'll be on Moodle. It'll be open book, open note. It'll be 75 minutes. And that reminds me, if you have like special requests, I think I tried to honor the ones from last time, but I might forget. So if you have special like student resource center, is that what it's called? Student resource center, like situations, tell me, because then I can set them up for you. But if you don't tell me, I cannot set them up for you. So yeah, get in touch if you have special situations I need to set up for you. But yeah, otherwise, just if you registered in person, come take the test in person. If you registered online, take it online. I'll probably get a bunch of emails from in-person people saying, oh, but I don't actually want to come in person. And then I'll say, fine, you don't actually have to come in person. So anyways, just, yeah, but tomorrow, class time, 75 minutes. Other questions? How many questions? So there'll be 8 short answer and then 2 essay questions. Same as last time. Yeah. Yeah, I thought actually the timing was pretty good last time. Some people ran out of time. Most people did not. The people who did run out of time can think, what did I do that cost so much time? And what can I do now to save some time? And again, download the slides. I've told you this so many times, but download these. Have them on your computer. If you don't know how to use PDFs effectively, copy and paste them into a Word document and then use that. Make it so it's searchable. It will make your life easier. I can explain that more if you don't understand what I'm talking about, but this is a major difference, I think, between the students who did and did not run out of time. Okay, other questions? All right, why don't we call it there, because there are actually a lot of other things to go over. It sounds like maybe you're all very prepared, but it's probably the opposite. You're all not so prepared. So do it now, right? The exam's tomorrow. You got 24 hours. So get ready. So today we're going to conclude our discussions of meditation. Just a kind of a reminder, we talked about mindfulness last time. It feels like it was a long time ago, wasn't it? When was the last time we met? Was that Monday? Yeah, it was more than like a week and a half ago, right? Almost a week and a half. So yeah, it's been a while. Remember we sat in class and meditated together? Was that cool? It's kind of cool, right? We did the headspace meditation. I introduced you guys to this idea of mindfulness-based stress reduction. We talked about how stress is a problem in all of our lives, and meditation kind of offers a solution to that problem. Things are never so simple, but there's actually something very appealing about this, right? We often are thinking, I'm thinking, what can I do to be a little less stressed out, to be a little more on top of my life, on top of my game? And meditation is a really alluring solution to this problem. So we can see why this became so popular, why that Headspace program is as popular as it is. And again, this was designed to be kind of a secular stress reduction exercise. So it sort of makes sense that that's the role that it plays in our lives now. This we started last time. Did we watch the Matrix clip? I think we did, right? The red pill, blue pill thing. So yeah, we started to talk about this. Morpheus says to Keanu that you're born into a prison for your own mind, right? And the book that we're reading, Robert Wright, actually, I went through and I realized the pages were a little off. I think my physical copy and your digital copy, or the digital copy I gave you, have slightly different pagination somehow. I don't totally understand how that works. But in any case, same contents. And the upshot is that we are prisoners. Has anybody watched The Matrix yet? Has anybody done the extra credit? Has anyone watched The Matrix for extra credit yet? Okay, well, I would, it's a little late now because the exam's tomorrow, but I wanted to give it to you before the break so you had a little time to do it. Because obviously it ties in with the exam. Right? It would be a good way to kind of prepare. So if you have no other studying to do, but it sounds like everybody has more studying to do, so Jessica just watched it. Okay, cool. And yeah, it's something that might, help get you thinking about Buddhism for the exam. There's nothing about the Matrix on the exam, just to make that clear. This is just extra credit. You don't have to do it at all, but it might be a fun way to prepare for the exam and then also get this out of the way at the same time if you're planning to do it. But the question we have not answered yet is, what does this have to do with Buddhism? This whole thing about a prison for your mind. Why does this book, Robert Wright, why does he begin with this quote from The Matrix? What is his argument? What is Robert Wright's argument? So this is on the exam. Let's see. Assignments, review sheet, right? If I've got an author and a book name, you should probably know what that author is saying and what that book is about, right? Now, again, we're going over today, but we probably won't be able to go over like every detail of all the podcast and these two books, just realistically speaking. So I'm going to need your guys' help to figure this stuff out. What is his argument? What is he saying? Why does he begin with this whole prison thing? The prison for your mind. Why are we born into a prison for our mind? Okay. Okay, that's a good start. So Lauren is saying that our suffering is based on delusions, right? So even if if you're looking at the reading, there's this section header that says everyday delusion. So that's a good way to approach this. There's a section header that talks about why pleasure fades, unhelpful insights, the truth about mindfulness. And how much did I assign? I think I gave you the first 2 chapters, right? That's how much it was. And so even just looking at the section headers, you can kind of get a sense of what he's trying to say here. He gives you a little narrative about his own experiences, my big breakthrough. But hopefully this book is pretty straightforward, right? Some things I assign you are pretty hard. This is not that hard to, at least not too hard to understand. I think there are a lot of ideas here that are pretty good. So I'll write down what Lauren just said. So we have this stress and this suffering. Why do we suffer? because, or I'll write it, why we suffer because of delusions. So that's pretty good, right? Just like in the Matrix, there's some sort of illusion happening in front of our minds. We're trapped in the Matrix. Robert Wright is arguing that we are too. So why are we trapped in the Matrix? Well, his whole thing is about evolutionary psychology. What does evolutionary psychology have to do with it? The truth about mindfulness. Let's see. There's the section on why pleasure fades. I don't know if he uses the term evolutionary psychology here. Yeah. So on page 6, for example, right, just a few pages in, he talks about evolutionary biology, right? And he's talking about how natural selection designs us to be a certain way. And he basically goes on to say we are seeking a sort of pleasure. He talks about these powdered sugar donuts that he loves on page 8, a couple pages later. You guys following along with me? Again, this is in your interest because you have an exam on this tomorrow. So if you have no idea what any of this is talking about, pay attention now. Open it up right now. So he's saying there's certain pleasures that we want. Somebody trying to talk? There's certain pleasures that we want. He used the example of this powdered sugar donut that he loves. And he talks about dopamine, right? Have you guys heard of dopamine before? Right? You go on the internet and you get some dopamine from your friends telling you how great you are, or something like that. And so in my book, it's 8 and then going into 9. You guys might have slightly different page numbers. He says you'll get a big blast of dopamine after the taste of the donut sinks in. But once you've confirmed powdered sugar donut eater, the lion's share of dopamine spikes comes before you actually bite into the donut and you stare longingly at it. The amount that comes after the bite is much less than the amount you got at first, and the pre-bite, blah, blah, blah. So he basically says there's this biological thing that is happening where we keep seeking after these very pleasurable moments, right? You could imagine our ancestors who are, they're trying to get nutrients out in the wild or something like this, right? And so they're biological predisposed to desire these really nutrient-rich things like powdered sugar donuts. But then when you actually get them, it's not quite the reward you're seeking, right? Maybe you need to eat more and eat more and eat more, or go get something else, or go get something else, or go get something else. And so what he's arguing is we are predisposed, we are biologically predisposed to this sort of letdown, right? Again, what's the section title? Why pleasure fades, right? We are predisposed to be let down by these expectations. Have you guys ever had this experience before? Where you think, oh yeah, I just need to get this thing. Then once I get this thing, then I'll be good. And then you get that thing. For example, being a Jasper. I know this is very different than eating a donut, but maybe you thought if I could just get into college and get into a good school, then everything will be fine. Then everything will be set, right? But once you get to college, is everything fine? Is everything set? Maybe it is for some of you, but no, not really. Life goes on. You get new challenges, you get new difficulties, right? And then after this, you're going to think, all right, if I could just get that job, and maybe you'll even get that job. And once you get that job, are you going to be set and everything going to be good? Probably not, right? Then there's going to be a new thing you're going to have to think about. Mortgages and children and health problems and all the, COVID-19 coming out of nowhere, all the other things, family, right? Family complexities. There's always something more. And yet we sort of trick ourselves into thinking, yeah, if I just get this thing, then everything will be fine. So again, we don't have time to go through all of the arguments, but that's the basic idea. He talks about feelings as being illusions, right? This is toward the end of the section that I assigned to you. He talks about pain that doesn't hurt. There's this very famous picture here. Have you guys ever seen this picture? It's a little disturbing, but hopefully we can handle it. You guys know this picture? No. So this, I think I first saw this, I think it's the cover of a Rage Against the Machine album that came out when I was a kid. So this is a monk. This is a Buddhist monk who lit himself on fire. This is gasoline. It was 1963, right? That's when he died. And some people say it's him protesting the Vietnam War. It's actually him protesting the government that the Americans were supporting in the Vietnam War, which is sort of confusing. It was a Christian government. He's Buddhist, and he was protesting anti-Buddhist developments during his lifetime. And so why am I showing you this horrible picture? Well, in a sense, this section is called what? Pain That Doesn't Hurt, right? And he tells the story about this monk and how he might enter into a state where his entire body should be in incredible pain. Have you guys ever burned yourselves before? It hurts, right? It's a crazy kind of hurt. It's a sort of, I have too. I burned my finger when I was baking over COVID. It was really, really uncomfortable. I'll save you guys the details. But man, you burn yourself, it's like a searing hot pain for like hours, right? Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really, right? It just continues for a long time. You put some aloe vera on there, maybe puts the fire out a little bit. But here is a pain that I can honestly not imagine, right? I'm complaining about my little finger getting burned. This guy's entire body is quite literally on fire. And he's not like a stuntman or something, right? And yet he's able to sort of sit there with a pretty straight face. And it's really quite unbelievable. And so what Robert Wright is arguing is there is a way, well, maybe I can even just read his quotation here. If many unpleasant feelings, let me see if I can find it. I don't see it, actually. Weaken their grip. I didn't write up anything in this book, so. I don't see it. Melancholy. So in some sense of illusion, we can use meditation to dispel them, or at least weaken their grip. It's an illusion. It really exists. Well, maybe I wrote the wrong page number. In any case, he's using, yeah, again, I think it's this page number difference. In any case, what is he saying here? Is that as this guy's story demonstrates, feelings don't necessarily have to reflect reality, right? We can undergo certain experiences. And what he is arguing is through meditation, right, by accepting or even embracing an unpleasant feeling, you can get a critical distance from that feeling and maybe even diminish its unpleasantness. So that's basically what he's arguing here, is we can use mindfulness meditation to deal with the difficulties of life. So he's saying we are born into this prison full of illusions and difficulties and sufferings and false feelings and all this sort of thing, but there is a solution to it, right? And of course, he wants to say meditation is the solution. So any questions on Wright? How does that sound? I know we're going through it very quickly. We started to go through it before. If you haven't read it yet, just read it. It's pretty easy to read. It's not that long. It's only 20-something pages, but it goes quite quickly. So I encourage you to just look through it. And if you have no other questions, let's move on. So next we have the podcast. You guys listen to the podcast yet? Again, it's been a long week. Maybe you had other things to do. One reason I assign podcasts is because they're actually pretty easy, right? You just put them on, headphones, go for a walk. It's a good excuse to go for a walk in the beautiful spring day like today. I was listening, I've heard this before, of course. I was listening to it again on the way to class today. And we've got this Inner Game of Tennis. This is not a book that I've ever read or honestly ever heard of before this podcast. It's kind of old, 1982. But I guess it was sort of a big deal when it came out. Inner Game of Tennis. Michael Lewis comes out and he says, anyone can coach anything, and anyone doing anything now needs a coach. And one reason I like Michael Lewis, he's a great writer, he's a great thinker, he's a very clear thinker, And this is sort of his summary of this entire episode as he's exploring. This podcast is about coaches. And so he's exploring this idea of a mind coach or a performance coach is I think what they call themselves. So what does he mean here? Can anybody make sense of this? Anyone can coach anything. That's the first statement. And then number two, anyone doing anything now needs a coach. Can anybody explain this for me? Why can anyone coach anything? And why is anyone doing anything now need a coach? I guess why don't we make it a bit more broad and try to invite people into the conversation. What do coaches do? What is a coach supposed to do for you? Coaches coach. Pretty good.
Helping you to get better.
They help you get better. Okay. How do coaches help you get better? Actually, yeah, a lot of you guys probably have coaches. Lucas, do you have a coach?
Yeah, I have a coach.
What does your coach do for you?
I think our coaches have more experience, so they see stuff from outside the game. They have a different perspectives, and so they can help us with the experience, maybe.
Okay. And Lucas,
They also can organize everything, like manage everything and organize everything.
okay. And you play soccer, right?
Yeah, I play soccer.
Okay. And yeah, this is something to think about. You know, I watch a decent amount of basketball, and you've got all these incredible athletes out there on the floor. And then you've got these old, like rotund, non-athletic guys sort of telling them what to do. And it's worth thinking about, like, hey, how did this come to be? But it's just like Lucas is saying, right? Those people on the sidelines, at least theoretically, have a lot of experience. They've played the game before. They know how to manage the team. They know how to lead the team. They know how to organize all the plays and that sort of thing, right? And so coaching, there's actually a lot to it, but most of it comes down to how well do you know the game, right? If I want to learn how to shoot a foul shot in basketball or how to kick a penalty kick in soccer or whatever, I need somebody who actually knows how to do that, right? That's sort of what a coach is supposed to do. Yeah, I said mentor, set goals, project one's ability doing something. Okay, I think Harrison's starting to get into this inner game part. So I don't know how to play soccer. I don't know how to coach basketball. I don't know how to do any of these things. So how is Michael Lewis saying anyone can coach anything? I can't coach basketball, can I? Maybe I could coach basketball. I definitely can't coach soccer, though. Definitely cannot coach soccer. Why is Michael Lewis saying anyone can coach anything? What is he getting at here? What sort of coaching is he talking about? What is this inner game? It's kind of. Okay. So Lauren said it's like mindfulness. It's getting people into the right mindset, the right headset. Harrison says I can coach religion. That's true. I am coaching religion. And yeah, it does make you think, what's the difference between teaching and coaching? I think it's worth thinking about. They're actually pretty similar. So Lauren's on the right track here. So again, if you haven't heard the podcast, listen to it. It's pretty interesting. So there's this guy, the author of this book. Michael Lewis is interviewing him, and he doesn't know anything about the tuba. He doesn't know anything about music, classical music. He's just a total noob, right? But then he goes and they invite him to give a lecture, and he's giving someone advice about how to play the tuba. And the thing that he asks the person, even though he doesn't know anything about playing the tuba, he says, what do you find most difficult in performing at your level with the tuba? And he says, this is a good way to phrase it, right? What do you find most difficult? Is because even if somebody's a total expert, like Lucas, we could ask Lucas this. You don't have to respond if you don't want to, Lucas. But what do you find most difficult in playing soccer? And we could get more specific, like in shooting a penalty kick, or depending on whatever position you play, playing defense or whatever. What do you find most difficult in your task? And you guys can think about this too. What do you find most difficult in taking an exam? Right? You have an exam tomorrow. Maybe some of you guys are nervous about it. I can try to coach you, right? What do you find most difficult in taking an exam? Think about any task you want, but maybe we can kind of go through this exercise together. What, Lucas, you have thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have something. For example, when I play soccer and we consider a goal something, and that we like. For me, it's hard to play with the same energy and the same confidence when it's like when we lead, like when we down a goal or something, that we forget about it and try to play as nothing happens. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of hard for me.
This is a common problem, and thank you for participating. This is actually an exciting moment. Maybe you've heard this before. Some teams kind of play down to their competition. Have you guys ever heard this before? It might be like a really good team, but if they play kind of a scrub team, they'll play worse against the scrub team because they're not sort of taking it as seriously. And so what I hear Lucas saying is he finds it difficult to sort of keep that motivation up when his team is ahead, they have the lead, right? How do you sort of keep your foot on the accelerator, so to speak? How do you keep playing hard and win the game, frankly, right? Without sort of giving the other team a chance to score. And what Tim Galloway would do, we don't have to do this, but what Tim Galloway would do is he'd say, what does it feel like when you are, when you're up 2 goals to 0, right? What starts to happen? What precisely sort of mindset do you enter into? What sort of playing do you start to what sort of patterns do you fall into? And he tries to identify them, right? And so again, we don't have to do this now, but this is useful for you taking the exam tomorrow, and for Lucas, maybe the next time we play soccer, right? Is you can actually identify these things. You can identify where your performance starts to trail off. So again, listen to the podcast. But what happens in the podcast is the tuba player says he has trouble with like high octave articulation or some term like that. And he says, I can feel it in my tongue. And so then Tim Galloway says, well, don't listen to the music, but pay attention to your tongue and make sure your tongue is doing the right thing, something like that. And so even though Tim Galloway doesn't know anything about the tuba, and again, this would be like me coaching Lucas, which I'm not a performance coach, so I'm not even going to try. But is you got to focus on the right things, right? And if you're focusing on the wrong things, you're actually going to end up causing problems for yourself, even if you're performing at a very high level, right? So for the exam tomorrow, if you're focusing on like, oh no, the clock is running out, and this chair is sort of uncomfortable, and oh crap, I didn't download the slides yet, and so I got to download those, and then maybe I'll find in this answer. No, it's not in this one. I got to download another one, right? All of this would just be a distraction away from actually taking the exam. You got to set all that stuff up beforehand. Make sure you're in a comfortable position. Make sure, you have a drink if you need a drink. Make sure your computer's plugged in. Make sure all your stuff is working, and then start the exam, right? So that way you don't get distracted. So this is what Michael Lewis is talking about, right? It changes coaching from I have all this knowledge of basketball or of soccer or of test taking or any other specific thing, and now I'm coaching people about how to get into the right mindset in order to do something. You see this shift? And it's relatively new, right? It's within the last 40 years, let's say, but I think even in the last 10 years, it's kind of increased in an interesting way. And also now everybody needs a coach, right? So like, even though I like to think I'm a pretty good teacher, maybe someone could coach me how to be a better teacher, right? In fact, there are such coaches about how to become better teachers and better all sorts of things. Okay, here are some of the characters we meet. Now, Tiffany Gaskell, she's the one who interviews Michael Lewis. It's sort of a long episode. It's about an hour. If I were more technologically savvy, I might edit it down and cut some things out. There's some commercials you can skip over and that sort of stuff. The real interesting parts, there are 2 parts that I want you to focus on. One is where there's Tiffany Gaskell, when she interviews Michael Lewis, and he's talking about driving. You guys remember this part? So they're talking about the performance of driving. So what is Michael Lewis's problem? He says it this way: I don't like the way I can be distracted by small irritations. What is he talking about here? You guys ever get distracted by small irritations when you're driving?
Yeah, wasn't he talking about like how he's like kind of judgmental when he's driving based off like the distractions he sees?
Yeah, there's another word for this. You guys ever, what does it mean when you get distracted by small irritations when you're driving? Is there a better way to put this?
Road rage?
Road rage. Yeah, he's talking about road rage. You guys ever get road rage?
Mhm.
Yaya doesn't sound like a road rage kind of person. Lauren, do you ever get road rage? Not really. See, you guys are all nice and kind of chill. Does anybody want to talk about
No,
road
I definitely get road rage.
Okay,
I
yeah.
definitely get road rage. If you're in LA, bro, you're gonna hear about it.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I feel like New York in particular, you get some road rage. So why do people get angry when they're driving? Does it make them better drivers? It does not, right? Okay, Nia says road rage. Yeah, here we go. And so it's an interesting question. It doesn't make you a better driver, and yet it happens all the time, right? So why do people get road rage? What do you think? Can anybody walk us through the psychology of road rage?
I don't drive, but isn't it basically that when you're driving on a road and you're in a car, you're stressed about crashing the car, and so when someone cuts you off or does something that displeases you, you're already on edge from anxiety, so it makes you angrier faster. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. I like that, ICE is sort of approaching this from an outsider perspective. Remember, we had insider, outsider, double vision, right? So here's an outsider perspective. And I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, right? When you're driving a car, the stakes are amped up a little bit, aren't they? Right? If you're just walking down the street and you bump into somebody, obviously that's not great, but it's not that big of a deal. But if you're driving a car and you bump into somebody, we're talking money, right? At the very least. And maybe we're talking injury, right? We're talking life itself. And so the stakes are very high. People are a little on edge to begin with, a little anxious to begin with. And so if anything, even if nothing bad happens, if anything close to bad happens, people get kind of upset, understandably so. And so then that can kind of add up, and we end up with Michael Lewis saying he is distracted by small irritations, right? Somebody cuts you off, it's like, what the hell? Right? I almost crashed into you because you're being a jerk. Quit being a jerk, quit being an idiot. And so Michael Lewis goes through sort of an interesting meditation where he's saying, in an ideal world, I'm, what did he call it? Like detachedly bemused or something like that. Maybe he switched those words around, bemusedly detached, basically saying he sees other people do stupid stuff, but he doesn't really care. It's like, oh, that's amusing. Somebody cut me off. On the other hand, sometimes when he's really kind of stuck in it, he gets really pissed off, and he might even want to like seek out some kind of revenge or something like that. And so that's when you get tailgating, right? And sometimes, when people get mad at each other, I'm sure you've heard of this, or maybe even seen like video clips or something before. It can lead to real fights, right? People pull over, throw down, and all sorts of crazy stuff happens. So this is not any small issue that we're highlighting here. And so what was Gaskell's advice? What sort of, I can read you the section I pulled out. Putting your feet on the ground, you feel connection with the ground, and stay in the bubble and just really feeling this positivity in the bubble around you. What color is the bubble? As you can tell, this is not perfect English. I think it was automatically generated from the episode, but it'll have to do. So what is this bubble thing that she's talking about? What was her advice for him? What was the exercise that they went through?
Isn't it almost like a mini like meditation thing just to like focus on your bubble? Like I think he said his bubble was like blue and pink. And how it like made him feel, he like felt it, like she told him to rate it on like an out of 1 to 10, like how he felt in that bubble, and he said he felt it like an 8. So I guess it kind of grounded him again and took away the judgment and the road rage that he was feeling or could feel in the future.
Yeah, excellent. So again, it's this inner game of driving, right? It's what is a good mindset to be in when you're driving? Is it good to be irritated? Is it good to be driving while you're in road rage? I think we could all agree, no, it is not good, right? And I think Michael Lewis would agree. And yet we sometimes can't control ourselves. And so what Gaskell is doing is saying, let's do a meditation, right? What is the ideal way to respond to other people driving poorly? And he gave a response. He said, I could be in this bubble, be in this happy place where I'm sort of detached and just amused by the things that are happening around me. And just like Yaya was saying, we can practice that, right? We can practice having this sort of detached response. And then they go into more detail. They talk about this feeling She asks him to find some place in his body where he might associate this feeling. And what does he say? It's his toes, right? Actually, I don't think they mention it here, but she keeps kind of leading him to his chest, right? To say, all right, put this feeling in your chest. And he's like, no, I don't want to put it in my chest. I want to put it in my toes. And so it's sort of this hilarious moment where he's trying to be rebellious against the exercise, but still participate at the same time. And so, yeah, exactly. We end up with this meditation, which is even grounded within his body. And so the next time he is road raged, right? The next time he is being tempted into this moment of frustration, he can kind of come back to this happy place, right? And so that's the basic exercise. It's just like the calming meditation. It's just like the headspace meditation, right? It's just take a deep breath, focus on the moment, breathe, right? Don't chase after these distracting irritations. Just focus on the task at hand, focus on driving. Maybe the details are different. They are different, right? And so you can listen to the podcast to get all the details, but it's effectively what we've seen before, right? It's taking meditation practices and then applying them to very specific real world situations and calling it performance coaching. Question about the bubbles? How's that sound? Okay, the next thing I also wanted to make sure you guys heard, again, there's like a section about the firefighters. If you have limited time, you don't have to listen to that part. I'll let you figure it out. But this was also a good part. This is toward the end. It's about Dixie Lewis. As you might notice, she has the same last name as Michael Lewis. Why do they have the same last name? She is his daughter, and she is an elite softball player. And so again, all of the sports players out there, I think this is something maybe you can relate to, because this is about, I think it's in high school at this time, but it's a very similar sort of situation that I think many of you have been through and perhaps are still going through, is how do you perform at this elite level with all this pressure and all these coaches and all these colleges and all these different things coming in from all sides. And this guy, Ben Oliva, he's a mental performance coach. He comes in and again gives her some exercises to try. And we don't have to go through all the details. Again, you can listen to it. He talks about shifting your attention. What does he say? Shift your attention to the way that the seat feels underneath you, the way that your weight feels on the seat. And then they start laughing. He's like, isn't this a weird thing to do? And she's like, yeah, that is a weird thing to do. Why would he do that? Why is he giving her this advice to shift her attention to the way that the seat feels underneath her? What does that do for her? What does that have to do with performance coaching? Centers her attention on what? Okay, good. So it centers her attention on how she's sitting. She's not thinking about the laundry she has to do. She's not thinking about what'll happen if the coach sees me do this thing. She's not thinking about what's going to happen in the future. She's not thinking about her GPA or what job she's going to get or how important this exam is or all the other things that are falling apart all around her, right? All of that kind of fades to the background as she focuses on the present moment, right? What she is experiencing in the present moment. And so again, mindfulness, right? This is exactly what we saw previously. And then this gets applied to when she's at bat, right? And again, I don't have a lot of experience with being at bat, but I think we can kind of understand this. Previously, she would be nervous. Again, if you can't imagine this, think of the exam tomorrow. You're thinking, oh no, I can't do bad on this exam. If I do bad on this exam, I'll get a bad grade in the class. And if I get a bad grade in the class, I'll get a bad GPA. If I get a bad GPA, I can't go to law school or whatever I want to do. I can't get that internship I'm trying to get. And so just don't mess up. She uses a different word here. I won't repeat it, but don't mess up, right? Don't do bad. Don't get it wrong. Don't do this wrong. Don't do that bad thing. For her, she's thinking about her coach. Her coach is really intense, and she uses a lot of four-letter words. And so she's basically saying, just don't miss, right? Don't mess up. Don't get the question wrong on the exam. This is her kind of beginning state, right? And eventually she shifts to a new catchphrase, loose and aggressive. And the way she says it is like really locked in. She's really focused, right? And so if we go back to Lucas, for what it's worth, this is something maybe you could play with, right? What is your mindset when your team is up and you're thinking, all right, we just need to not lose. Just don't lose the lead, right? And of course, I don't know if this is what you're thinking or what your team is thinking. Think about what sort of mindset you could go into that would help you stay locked in, right? The score is 0-0, right? You don't have to think about the score. What can I do in this particular moment in order to play better defense? Not thinking about the score, not thinking about all the other context, just focused, loose and aggressive, focused, and depending on what sort of role you play on the team, may be something different. But how can you change your mind state, right? What sort of little phrase, what sort of little trick can you develop to perform more effectively, right? More efficiently, more, and again, achieve the goals that you're looking for. Because the great irony is what she keeps thinking about is like, I have to get on base. I have to get on base. If I don't get on base, then I'm not going to get a scholarship and everything's going to fall apart. But by thinking that, she's not able to get on base, right? To really get what she is looking for, she can't be all caught up in these other distractions. They just become distractions. And so what this exercise does, what this mental performance coaching is asking her to do, is isolate what very specifically will help her actually achieve her goals. How does that sound? Have I made this podcast sound appealing? You guys want to go listen to it now? I obviously some of you already did, but I encourage you to check it out. It's actually pretty good. And if we go back to Robert Wright, I know this is sort of maybe a little confusing. I give you these paradoxes and you're probably not really sure what's going on, but we can begin to kind of make sense of these things, right? So one of the paradoxes he points out is we have these illusory feelings, these feelings of anxiety, fear, self-loathing, melancholy, right? Dixie Lewis is going through some of these issues. She's anxious, isn't she? What is she anxious about? Her future, how everybody thinks about her, what her coach thinks about her, what her teammates thinks about her. She doesn't want to let them down, anything like that, right? What Robert Wright is saying is by accepting or even embracing these unpleasant feelings, we actually kind of develop a critical distance from them. We're no longer afraid of all of these negative outcomes, right? By doing these meditation exercises, we might even be able to overcome them in very interesting ways. So again, you can go back to Robert Wright to figure out the details of that, but it ties in with the example of Dixie Lewis. Maybe we can zoom out and think. There was another line from the podcast. I won't fish it out for you, but when I was listening to it this morning, it struck me is that he was thinking kind of about history. Like, why does this develop now? What is the goal of all of these practices, right? So we've got mental performance coach, right? Why weren't there mental performance coaching? The question that Lewis asks is, why weren't there mental performance coaches for like Leonardo da Vinci? What do you guys think? What is it about now that makes us need these mental performance coaches? About our modern age? Why didn't Leonardo da Vinci have a mental performance coach? Increase in available knowledge. Interesting. Okay, maybe. Other thoughts? Are we just better and smarter than we were back in the day? But didn't I already tell you that these are actually very old practices that people have been doing for a long time? They're just being applied in different ways now. Why are we applying them? Maybe the first question is, how are we applying them? What is mental performance trying to do? And what problem is this trying to solve? Okay. Decrease anxiety. Performance anxiety. All right, so Lauren said decrease performance anxiety. I like that. Why do we have performance anxiety?
I don't know, like putting in the work. Higher state. So like maybe in the past you failed at something, you could just go back to being a farmer or whatever your parents did. But these days, if you fail at something, there's much harsher consequences. Like if you fail at your job, there's a chance you could be homeless, and you might not qualify for certain services, and you'll be left on your own, and you'll be destitute.
Okay, it was actually hard for me to listen to both at the same time. Lauren was talking too, but I think we are moving in a good direction here. We overthink, which makes you not as confident, right? Yeah, I think we're starting to hit the nail on the head, and one reason we're able to hit this nail on the head is you guys experience this probably even more than I do, right? I had a certain amount of this anxiety where I need to be efficient and performing all the time. We talked about discipline before. You should let a lot of people depend on you. Very interesting. Yeah. I had these same sorts of feelings back, when I was 20 years old, but I think it's getting worse now. I think it's getting more extreme now, right? It's harder to find a good job. Jobs don't pay as much as they used to. There are more of these unpaid internships. There's more of this gig culture, right? The pressure has been kind of amped up, and we could talk about how that happened. But I think what we can all agree on, what I hear basically all of these comments saying, is that we need to perform, right, in a way that maybe was not always expected of us. What was it like to be Leonardo da Vinci? Frankly, I have no idea. But my guess is he had patrons who paid him a certain amount of money to make whatever he was making. And maybe he had deadlines, but they're probably pretty loose. I think he didn't finish a lot of his projects, and he just was sort of checking stuff out, right? That's frankly how I would be if I didn't have a bunch of deadlines. Sometimes deadlines can be your friend because what they do is they force you to finish a project, right? If you guys didn't have deadlines, you probably wouldn't finish as many projects either. That's why I have to give you deadlines, just because even with deadlines, sometimes we don't finish projects, right? So I think we're all touching on something now, which is basically, what does it feel like to be alive today? Is we must perform, right? We live in a society where, Dixie Lewis, bless her heart, a lot of her sense of self-worth is riding on her performance. Her father in the podcast said something like, "You are what your record says you are." I forget who he's quoting, but that basically is what he's describing. It's a world that we all live in, right? You guys might be really smart and you might be really capable and all these other things, but if you don't perform on the test, right? I don't really care. I'm going to give you whatever grade your test score offers. And we could say that that's fair because it's objective and all that sort of thing. And there's some truth to that, but it creates quite a bit of stress, right? It creates quite a bit of difficulty and the sense that we must perform all the time, which I think Isa, Lauren, Harrison, Jessica, I think that's exactly what you guys are all pointing to. And that's what this sort of coaching, right? Gaskell and this guy, Ben Oliva, you don't have to know their names, but these performance coaches, that's basically what they're trying to address here, right? Is how can we perform even better, right? And how can we deal with these stresses that are often hanging upon us as we are performing, because we know that they're counterproductive, and yet there's often nothing we can do about them. Now, there's one final turn. This might feel pretty good. If we use this language of, remember, duty, success, pleasure, remember all that? That's not going to be on this exam, but clearly we live in a world, at least this particular part of our world, where success is number one. Wouldn't you agree? I think that's the real development here, is that we live in this world that is just totally obsessed with success in every aspect of our lives. And in order to be more successful, meditation has sort of shifted to address those needs, right? Whereas previously it might have been used for other purposes. Maybe I can turn this into a question. Before this kind of cult of success that we live in, where poor Dixie Lewis is gonna, have an aneurysm at age 17 if she doesn't get on base enough. I'm stating that sort of lightly, but this is actually a real issue, right? If she doesn't get on base enough, maybe she'll have major, mental, emotional problems. Who knows? But before these days of all this pressure to succeed that is hanging on all of us, and it's on me as well as you guys, what was meditation for? Why would people meditate? What were they trying to do? They were doing similar things, right? Not trying to be over concerned with craving and with lust and anger and jealousy and all these other negative emotions. There is a very similar sort of exercise, but the purpose was different, right? Why did the Buddha teach about meditation? What was his goal? It wasn't so Dixie Lewis could get on base, right? This is a general question, but it'd be a nice exam question. It's too general for an exam question, but I think things like this will be on the exam. Okay. So okay. So Lauren's talking about the middle way, in case you can't hear it, balance between the extremes of discipline and indulgence. That's good. Why do we want to find that balance? What was his problem? What did he see that disturbed him so much? He saw suffering. Yeah. He saw suffering. He's not meditating so he can be a better king, so he can be a better CEO of some company or something like that, right? A lot of CEOs like to meditate. People like, I think Jack from Twitter, he's a big meditation guy. I saw some interview with him where he's like, I was meditating for like an hour and a half straight. I did a whole weekend of meditation. It's like, you guys are so competitive about meditation. It's ridiculous. Michael Lewis sort of makes fun of himself about this competitive meditation culture. He said, like, if there was, if there was some sort of tournament for meditation, then all of us out in California would sweep because they all learn how to do it in their classes or something like that. So, but again, as Lauren was looking through her notes and stated very nicely, early Buddhist meditation is not about success. It's not about getting on base or making more money or something like that. It's about suffering, right? It's looking out in the world and seeing all of the issues that are affecting us and dealing with those issues. Now, you could argue that all of her anxiousness that is expressed in those phrases that we were just looking at, that is a form of suffering. And I would agree with you. I think it is, right? But in the end, I think the Buddhist critique of her concern is actually she's too worried about getting on base, right? That she's not going to find what she's looking for when she gets on that base, right? That's what at least Robert Wright would say. We need to go a little bit deeper. Okay, so there's one final critique that I'm kind of leading us up to, and this is McMindfulness. We have 15 minutes left in class. Why don't I do a little video? Videos are good, right? I feel like I've been lecturing this whole time. It's too much lecture. Let me pause the recorder. So again, this is McMindfulness, and this is the other book here, Ron Purser, McMindfulness. So that's another good thing to know. And it feels like a KFC ad. It, in fact, is a KFC ad, Isa. So very good. And so we can think about, we can do the same sort of comparison we just did. What is Buddhist meditation all about? What are they trying to do? We just talked about that, right? It's find kind of the cure to suffering. What is this mind coaching trying to do? It's trying to help us perform better in this world that is obsessed with performance. What is this meditation trying to do? What would you say? Sell you pot pie? Yeah, for sure. What approach is it using? I guess first of all, does it work? Is anybody hungry for a pot pie now? I hope I'm not hypnotizing anybody into going to buy a pot pie, but I guess we do what we must. To be clear, KFC is not paying me to show this to you. But yeah, what sort of techniques are they using to try to make this pot pie more appealing?
It's like when he says, imagine the warmth from the crust is surrounding you.
Mm-hmm. So and actually you guys tend to talk about the same things around the same time. So Lauren, I start saying there's the sensory experience. Is that what you're saying too, Lauren? Right? So the warmth of the crust, the flakiness, right? I kind of forget all the details, but all of these, it pulls you into it and asks you to almost imagine these things. And frankly, if I were eating a pot pie and doing the comfort zone video at the same time, it could be a pretty powerful thing, right? There is such thing as mindful eating. Have you ever heard of this before? A famous one is eating a raisin. And so how is mindful eating different from regular eating? You don't like scarf a handful of raisins all at the same time and just sort of get them down your gullet, right? What do you think you try to do in mindful eating? Yeah, one raisin at a time. Chew very slowly. There's mindful walking too, where you walk very slowly and you kind of think about all the steps you're taking. So you chew very slowly. Think about the texture of the raisin. Isa?
Doesn't it also make you more aware of your body system because you're paying attention to how you swallow, where the raisin is going in your mouth,
Yeah.
and all that other stuff?
Yes, exactly. You're paying more attention to the processes involved. Exactly. And it's actually kind of magical. I mean, I don't want to freak you guys out, but you know, when you just eat something, it's sort of amazing, right? If you think about it, first, this is outside of my body. Now it is inside of my body. Now I'm sort of chewing it and grinding it. And, you know, my saliva is doing something to begin to break it down. And then it makes its way down my throat. And then I generally stop thinking about it anymore, but it is still inside of my body. Amazing, right? And so there is something kind of spectacular about this. But what is KFC ultimately doing here? They're taking these sorts of practices and then using them, like we already said, like Isa said from the beginning, to sell some pot pies, right? The goal here is not to help you achieve enlightenment, help you understand suffering, to see things more clearly, right? What is the goal here? Is the goal here to stop your cravings? It's here to
No.
enhance your craving, right? What a disturbing concept. So I hope I didn't hypnotize anybody into the cult of the pot pie here, but I chose this example to prove an important point. Is meditation is a tool, right? It's kind of neutral, and it could be used to achieve kind of, well, many different goals, right? It could be used to understand the world better, understand yourself better, understand your relationship with other people better. It could be used to try to be more successful and to achieve your goal, to get on base, right? To get whatever you're trying to achieve. And that is also perhaps even related to understanding. So I don't even mean to criticize that completely. But this one, I do want to criticize, right? The goal of this is to get you hooked on pot pies, right? It's trying to reel you in. And it's sort of being cheeky, right? Like Harrison said, it's weird. And that's sort of their advertising system. I don't know if you've noticed this about KFC, but they're trying to be like extra weird, but kind of funny, and therefore attract sort of the fast food eating crowd this way. And maybe it works. This one doesn't really work on me, but at the same time, that's effectively what they're trying to do, right? Is use meditation as like a fad that they can suck people in. Now, of course, Purser's critique is that this stuff is bad, right? So McMindfulness, what does McMindfulness mean? Maybe you're starting to get a sense. He calls it a feeding frenzy of spiritual practices that provide immediate nutrition, but no long-term sustenance, right? So we start to get meditation practices that, again, might get us on base and might help get us kind of the immediate things we want. But when we think about the long-term trajectory of these practices, is Dixie Lewis, is she going to find what she looks for even if she gets this scholarship? Maybe she will. I mean, scholarship's a big deal, right? That could really open up things in life, but it's not the same thing that the Buddha was going for, right? Purser, in some ways, he's almost being like a fundamentalist here. He's like, let's get back to the basics of Buddhism, right? Let's stop using meditation for these short-term gains, these ridiculous advertising campaigns, and let's really think about the moral implications of what we're doing. Void of a moral compass or ethical commitments, unmoored from a vision of the social good, the commodification of mindfulness keeps it anchored in the ethos of the market. So again, this is related to the word ethical. What are the ethics of the market? Have you heard of the market before? What is this talking about? The ethics of the market. What do consumers care about? Yeah, the customer is always right. If it sells, then it's good, and it doesn't really matter beyond that, right? What we're talking about here is capitalism, right? Basically, just if it sells, then it's right. We only have 3 minutes left. There's more about
Isn't-
stress. Isa, go ahead.
Isn't it also appropriation? Because they're using something that's meant to be used spiritually and as a way of enlightenment, but they're using it for economic gain.
Yeah, I think that's definitely that's an important critique. Yeah, for sure. And this sort of thing happens all the time, right? If it sells, then people will grab it and they don't really care where it comes from. That's the whole point, right? Is that it's going to sell. Here's Bhikkhu Bodhi. We have 2 minutes left. Let's give him the final 2 minutes. So he is also kind of a modern Buddhist figure. And here's a quick interview with him. I won't
Perhaps the
even-
great challenge facing Buddhism for the future is to bring together its rich tradition of inward-focused contemplative practices with outer engagement with the world. If we have just an exclusive focus on contemplative practices, then we have the capacity to develop, call it beautiful, elevated, uplifted, even profound states of spiritual realization and attainment, but these states become sterile in regard to transforming the world. If we have just an emphasis on active engagement without the contemplative practices, then there's a tendency to spell our energy in various projects without the inner strength and spiritual resources to deal with these problems effectively. But when we bring together the strength, the equanimity, the deep compassion that comes from contemplative practice with a commitment to socially transformative action, then I think we have the double capacity to bring about the results that we aspire to.
Okay, you can watch that again if you're interested. So we're sort of left with a question, right? On the one hand, we're being presented with mindfulness is the solution to all of our problems. Do some mindfulness, stress reduction, and your life will be better, all these sorts of things. But at the same time, Purser is coming in and saying, well, but mindfulness can be used in bad ways, right? It can be used to sell pot pies, or it can be used in somewhat, neutral ways, sort of short-sighted ways, right? What he calls this feeding frenzy that gives immediate nutrition, right? Maybe you'll do better on your exam tomorrow if you meditate before, but is that going to cure suffering for you? Is that going to solve your problems in the long run? Maybe not, right? And so what do? Should we just give up on all this mindfulness stuff and try something else? Well, what Bhikkhu Bodhi is saying, and I obviously I like this quotation, is he's saying, no, mindfulness is good. It will help us center ourselves. It'll help us ground ourselves. It'll help us even develop a sense of compassion, but it's not enough, right? Mindfulness by itself is not enough. We also need social engagement, right? He's saying we also need to help each other, work within the world to help, feed people, clothe people, house people, and take care of each other, right? Because if we're just like some CEO who's meditating on some island and, not doing anything for anybody, then is this really going to help anybody in the world? Is this really what we want our spiritual practice to look like? He's saying, no, we need the social engagement too. So, okay, now we're over time. How do you guys feel about the exam tomorrow? Do you feel ready?
Yeah.
Mostly ready? Okay, good. I'll check my email tonight. Let me know if you have any questions, but definitely, I got to stress this. Get your notes together, go through the review sheet using the slides. If you do nothing else, do that, and you will have at least a sense of what is going on in the exam tomorrow. So good luck, happy studying. Again, feel free to get in touch if you have any questions, and I'll respond in a reasonable amount of time. So let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow.